What you're about to hear is based on something that happened to me when I entered a part of the public library that should have stayed locked forever. Subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. Your support is what keeps me digging up these dark stories. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I've always loved libraries. There's something comforting about being surrounded by shelves of old books, the smell of paper and ink, and the calm quiet that wraps around you like a soft blanket. For years, I spent most of my weekends at the city's central public library, a grand, time-worn building that dated back to the early 1900s. Its marble floors were scuffed from generations of footsteps, and the tall windows let in beams of dust-filled sunlight. But no matter how many times I came there, one thing always drew my attention more than any book ever could: a heavy, dark oak door on the third floor. It had a brass sign on it that read, "Restricted Collection, Staff Only." Every time I passed by it, I felt a strange pull. I'd even stopped once or twice, just staring at it, wondering what was behind it. The door was always locked. Always. Until it wasn't. It happened one gray Thursday afternoon. Rain was tapping against the windows, and the place was emptier than usual. I'd gone up to the third floor, as always, to browse through the old nonfiction section. But as I walked past that same oak door, I noticed it wasn't shut all the way. It was slightly open, just an inch or two, but enough to see the darkness inside. I paused. There was no sign of anyone around. No carts of books. No footsteps echoing through the marble halls. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the weird sense that the door had been waiting for me. I pushed it open. The air on the other side was colder, thicker. It wasn't a reading room. It wasn't even a proper archive. It looked like time had stopped in there decades ago. Dust blanketed everything. The walls were lined with tall shelves holding ancient books with cracking leather covers. The overhead lights flickered, the kind of yellow bulbs that buzz softly and make you feel like you're not supposed to be there. There were tables with yellowed papers stacked in neat but forgotten piles. I noticed an old card catalog tucked in a corner, the kind that hadn't been used in years. And in the center of the room was a large wooden desk. On it sat a thick notebook, open, as if someone had just been writing in it. I stepped closer and looked down at the page. The ink was faded, but not old. The handwriting was neat, methodical. I don't remember exactly what the entry said, but it mentioned a name I didn't recognize, and a phrase that stuck with me: "Not meant for shelves." I flipped the page. The next one was blank. I flipped again. Still blank. And then I noticed something else. The book that had been mentioned in the entry. I looked around the room, searching the spines of the books near me, trying to find the title. But the spot where it should have been was empty. It was as if someone had just taken it out, or as if it had never been there in the first place. I stood there for a long moment, unsure why I suddenly felt cold all over. The silence in that room wasn't normal library silence. It felt alive. I backed out slowly, quietly closing the door behind me. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Not then. But I came back. Of course I did. I couldn't get that room out of my head. Over the next few days, everything else felt off. I'd go to work, run errands, try to keep to my normal routine, but my mind always drifted back to the restricted collection. That notebook, that strange phrase, that missing book, and the way the silence inside that room didn't feel empty, felt watchful. By Saturday, I convinced myself I had to go back. I didn't really have a reason, just a gnawing feeling, like I'd opened something that now expected more from me.
The library was busier that day. Families with kids, students hunched over their laptops, the usual home of quiet life. I moved casually through the building, not wanting to draw attention. When I reached the third floor, I checked the door. Locked again. Of course. But something told me not to leave. So I waited. I pretended to browse. I checked my watch. Time passed slowly in that place, especially when you focus nearest to a single point. Eventually, just when I thought I was wasting my time, a librarian walked by with a ring of keys. She didn't ever notice me. Just opened the door, slipped inside, and pulled it shut behind her. Had so when I saw it, she hadn't turned the lock. I waited until the hallway was clear. Then I approached the door, tried the handle, and it opened without resistance. Inside, the room was darker than before. The lights flickered weakly above. There smelled like damp stone and old glue. Everything looked the same at first. But then I noticed something had changed. That notebook, the one on the desk, was gone. In its place was a new object, an envelope, yellowed and brittle. No name. No markings. I picked it up, carefully opened it. Inside were two things. Один a black-and-white photograph, old and creased. It shot the same room, but many decades earlier. 2. A torn piece of paper with one sentence written in the same handwriting as the notebook. Once found, it doesn't forget. The photo disturbed me more than I expected. It looked like the same space, same desk, same shelves, but in the photo, a person stood near the wall, facing away from the camera. Except there was something wrong with them. Their body was blurred as if they had been moving fast, or hadn't been fully there when the picture was taken. And my heart was racing. I turned in place, scanning the room. The shadows were deeper than they should have been. The books, some of them now looked scorched around the edges. I was sure they hadn't looked that way before. And worst of all, I thought I heard breathing. Not mine. Slow. Rhythmic. Coming from the far end of the room, behind the shelves. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to make a sound. But something about that room made you forget how long you'd been in it. Made you forget your own rules. I slipped the photo and the paper back into the envelope and stuffed it into my coat pocket. Then I backed out, heart pounding. When I got into the hallway, everything was bright and quiet again. The door shut softly behind me. I didn't look back. But as I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But that envelope stayed in my coat pocket, like a weight I couldn't ignore. Every time I reached for my keys or wallet, I felt it. And every time I remembered the sentence on the paper. Once found, it doesn't forget. I started dreaming about the room. Sometimes it sees a blurred figure from the photo, standing in the corner of my bedroom, unmoving. Other times I dreamed in total silence, surrounded by white towering shelves of books I couldn't read. It wasn't just in my sleep. The feeling followed me through my days, like I was being observed. Like something had shifted around me and no one else noticed. I lasted 3 days before I went back. This time, the door was locked tight. No librarian passed by. No opportunity to sleep inside. But I didn't need to go in. Because something was waiting for me elsewhere. I was walking through a second floor, the fiction section, a place I normally never visited when I saw it. A single book lying flat upon the floor in the middle of the aisle. No one round. It looked old. Dark green leather cover, worn edges, no visible title. I picked it up. The letter was warm to the touch, almost soft, like skin. I opened it to the first page. There was no copyright, no introduction. Just a sentence. This is the story of the ones who read what was never meant to be written.
Every page was filled with names, dates, locations, and descriptions. Short, cold descriptions of people, what they were doing, what they were reading, what they found. Some names were crossed out. Others had long lines of scribbles next to them, like someone had been trying to erase the text but couldn't. And then I saw something that made my chest go cold. My name. My full name. Written in the same narrow handwriting I'd seen in the notebook from the restricted room. Next to my name, the date was marked, the same day I'd first opened that door. Below it, reader confirmed. Bound. I closed the book and looked around, half expecting someone to jump out, yell at me, take it from my hands. But no one came. I took the book with me. I didn't know why. Maybe it already belonged to me now. Maybe I had no choice. At home, I placed it on my desk and stared at it for hours. I didn't open it again that night, but even closed, I could feel it, like it was aware of me. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up from a dead sleep. The book had moved. It was no longer on my desk. It was sitting on my windowsill, and it was open. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I'd moved the book in my sleep. Maybe I'd opened it without remembering. But the way it sat on the windowsill, perfectly aligned, its pages fluttering slightly despite no breeze, made that impossible. I approached slowly. The pages had turned again. I didn't touch them. It was open to a name I didn't recognize, Elena Brooks. A timestamp below it read, 3:17 a.m., the exact time I had woken up. Next to the name was a short note. Stood at the threshold. Did not enter. Then, even more unsettling, below that note, a second name appeared. Right in front of my eyes. The ink didn't bleed or form gradually. It was just there. Stephen Clark. 3:17 a.m. Heard it. Ignored it. Wrote nothing down. I stumbled backward. I didn't know these people, but the way the book tracked them, like observers, witnesses, potential readers, chilled me to my core. That meant the book was still watching. Not just me. All of us. I closed it immediately, wrapped it in cloth, and shoved it into the drawer of my nightstand. I should have burned it, thrown it into the river, done something, but I didn't. Over the next few nights, I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined new names writing themselves in the dark. Sometimes I'd wake up and find the drawer slightly open, the cloth unwrapped. Each time, the book had changed pages. More names. More timestamps. The entries were getting closer to my apartment. Closer to me. And then, 2 nights later, I recognized a name. Maya Jensen. She was my neighbor across the hall. I barely knew her, but we'd nodded in the elevator a few times. I knew her name because it was on her mailbox. Next to her entry, 2:03 a.m. Heard it breathing. Locked the door. I stared at the book for a long time. I hadn't told anyone about it. How was it doing this? What was it? Was it writing the future? Or was it just describing what it already knew was going to happen? That night, I sat in my dark apartment with every light off. I watched my door. I listened. And around 2 a.m., I did hear something. Not a knock. Not footsteps. Breathing. Slow and low just behind the door. I didn't move. Didn't blink. Eventually, the sound faded. But I knew what I'd hear if I checked the book. And sure enough, when I opened it later, there it was. My name. A second time. 2:11 a.m. Stayed still. Knew better. It had started documenting my choices. The book wasn't just observing anymore. It was judging. I knew I couldn't keep it anymore. The book was changing me. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped going to work. I stopped answering the door. My world became smaller and smaller until it was just me, my apartment, and the book. But it wasn't satisfied. Kept adding names. Kept tracking lives. And I realized something terrifying. No one else knew they were being watched. They lived their lives, unaware that their actions were being written down somewhere in that cursed object. I had to take it back. Maybe it would end if I returned it. Maybe I'd be free. Or maybe it was already too late. I arrived at the library just after closing. The sky was a deep blue, fading into black. I slipped around the back entrance. To my surprise, the door was unlocked. The building was silent. I moved like I had the first time, letting memory guide me through the shadows. Up the stairs. down the east hallway, to the corridor with the hidden door. It was open. No light came from the room this time. It was darker than I remembered, and the air was heavier. I stepped inside. It wasn't the same place anymore. The shelves were taller, endless, stretching far beyond the walls. The geometry felt wrong, like the room no longer existed in normal space. The desk was there, but older now, as if a century had passed since my last visit. I placed the book on it and stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the pages began to turn. Slowly at first, then faster, like hands flipping through the lives of everyone it had ever touched. Until they stopped. The book landed open to a new page. At the top, in large, ink-black letters, it read, "Return acknowledged." And beneath it, final entry, "Reader terminates cycle." I didn't understand. What cycle? Was I the last? I turned to leave, but the room was gone. There was no door, no corridor, only shelves, endless, silent shelves. I ran between them, calling out, but my voice was swallowed by the silence. And then I saw it. Another book, on another desk, identical in size, shape, and texture. I opened it. The first name inside was mine, and the note beneath it said, "Returned it, stayed, took his place." You're probably wondering if this really happened. I wish I was too. But if you ever visit your local library and find a room that wasn't supposed to be open, walk away, because once found, it doesn't forget.